And
we got to the moon the first time.
we definitely went to the moon. Yes, we went to the moon. We didn't go to the moon. We went to the moon several times.
Right. Oh, yeah. I just want to check your view on that.
We 100% went to the moon.
The moon landing was hailed as mankind's greatest achievement, watched by millions and taught in every classroom.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
But what if some of those iconic videos were actually staged? What if key footage mysteriously vanished, and insiders started leaking secrets NASA never wanted out?
During the 60s, they said, if you can't make it, fake it.
Still, Elon Musk insists it happened, but warns we've been focusing on the wrong thing entirely.
There are ruins out there that we have not been told about.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
And once you hear what he says really happened, you'll never look at the moon or history the same way again.
Wernher von Braun and a few guys from NASA went down to Antarctica. What's he doing in Antarctica? Finding moon rocks.
Origins of the moon landing dream.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Back in 1960, NASA wasn't trying to land anything. The early goal? Just orbit the moon with a 3-man team. Safe trip there and back. No boots, no flags. But then came John F. Kennedy. His 1962 speech didn't just shift gears, it floored the gas pedal.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Before this decade is out, he said, we will land a man on the moon. And with that one sentence, a whole nation changed its focus.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
By 1969, that promise became real. Neil Armstrong stepped out of the Apollo 11 lander and left a dusty footprint where no human had ever walked. It was a global moment. But here's the part most people forget. It came at a high cost. The kind of cost you don't see on TV specials or stamped on collectible coins. Before the glory of Apollo 11, there was Apollo 1, Virgil Grissom, Edward White, Roger Chaffee. All 3 astronauts died in a pre-launch test when a fire broke out inside their command module.
We got a bad fire!
The spacecraft was engulfed in seconds. No one made it out. NASA hit pause. Investigations began. Designs were reworked. The team added a new launch vehicle, made emergency exits faster, and doubled down on safety. What followed were Apollo missions 4 through 9, each a stepping stone, testing every nut, bolt, and trajectory. And as the Apollo program gained momentum, it was clear they were getting closer. But what came next was a mission that flew just close enough to the moon to see it, but didn't land. And it set the stage for what was about to change history forever. Stepping stones to Apollo 11. Before the world heard the words, "The Eagle has landed," there was a critical dress rehearsal called Apollo 10. And while it didn't make the headlines like its successor, it was the final, silent giant leap before the big one. Here's the twist. There were no Apollo 2 or Apollo 3. NASA skipped those numbers. Why? Because after the tragedy of Apollo 1, the missions that followed were unmanned and more like technical repeats. So, instead of filling the gap with placeholders, they moved forward, fast. Apollo 10 was different. It was the 4th manned mission under the Apollo banner, and its job was to do everything Apollo 11 would do, except actually land. The crew flew to the moon, orbited it, and even descended to within 10 miles of the lunar surface. But that hesitation was strategic. Apollo 10's success confirmed what NASA needed most: confidence. By this point, telescopes and satellites had already told scientists a lot about the moon's landscape, its craters, temperatures, and strange surface behavior. But standing on it, touching it, that was still unknown territory. So NASA trained astronauts using replicated lunar surfaces here on Earth, mimicking moon dust, simulating gravity shifts. Then came July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin descended in the lunar module named Eagle. Michael Collins stayed in orbit above, alone, keeping everything aligned. And when Armstrong's boot met the dusty gray soil, history was no longer theoretical. It was broadcast. However, while all of this was going on, there were people already staring at the footage and asking, "Hold on, where are the stars?" That's how it started. And then the floodgates opened.
If you were to talk to Aldrin or Armstrong, they would actually not respond in any way to questions regarding stars.
Saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Rise of the conspiracy theories. The moon, after all, is in space, and space is supposed to be full of stars. Yet, in almost every Apollo photo, the sky is black, completely starless. Conspiracy theorists latched onto this, claiming the stars were left out because the landing was filmed on Earth, and the studio forgot to add them in. NASA, of course, had an answer. According to them, the cameras used during Apollo missions weren't sensitive enough to pick up stars under such harsh lighting. The sunlight bouncing off the lunar surface washed them out. Like trying to see stars from a brightly lit parking lot, too much light drowns them out. Still, the doubts didn't end there. Critics pointed out the absence of a blast crater beneath the lunar module. If a spacecraft descended from the heavens, shouldn't it have scorched or displaced the surface beneath it? Yet, the landing spot looked untouched. NASA said the moon's dust was too fine, too shallow to show a dramatic impact. Plus, the module's descent engine wasn't firing full throttle when it touched down. Then there were the footprints, clearly visible, perfectly preserved, even after more than 50 years. That raised eyebrows. How could soft impressions survive without wind or erosion? Ironically, that's the exact reason why they remain. No weather means no change. What's left stays indefinitely. But even as NASA gave answers, the conspiracy theories multiplied. Some based on camera angles, others on missing shadows. A few went further, claiming the entire thing was filmed by Hollywood under government orders. And yet, through all the noise, one man wasn't having it. Elon Musk stepped forward, not to defend every detail, but to say the bigger picture is being missed.
And
So we got to the moon the first time.
and it was an important ideological battle with communism, because they couldn't put a person on the moon, and capitalism could.
Musk's position and classified mission rumors. When asked about the moon landing, Elon Musk made it clear the United States did land on the moon, and the people still doubting it.
If you wanted to fake the moon landing, you would have to fake all of these documents.
He thinks they're focusing on the wrong mystery, because maybe the real question isn't whether Apollo 11 happened.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
But whether it was really the last secret the government ever told us about the moon. After the success of Apollo 11, 6 more missions followed, up to Apollo 17. But here's the twist. Some people believe the story didn't end there. Rumors of classified missions began to swirl. Whispers of Apollo 18, 19, even 20. Missions that never appeared in official NASA timelines. Conspiracy theorists claim these missions didn't just return to the moon. They discovered things, structures, signals, maybe even something not human. NASA shut these claims down immediately. Publicly, Apollo 17, launched in December of 1972, was the final trip. Since then, the United States hasn't returned. But that absence? It raised more eyebrows than answers. If technology in the 1960s was powerful enough to get us there, why hasn't a more advanced generation gone back? Some say the reason for the silence is cost, others say politics. But for the skeptics, the lack of follow-up feels off. Suspicious even. Why not refresh the site? Replant the flag? Update the research? NASA insists the answer is simple. They've moved on. The moon served its purpose. And now the agency's attention is aimed at planets much farther away. But not everyone's convinced. Not when whispers of lost missions and hidden encounters still echo through documentaries and leaked tapes. And with Musk's increasing involvement in space exploration, the conversation is shifting. Because now, we're not just asking if we went, we're asking why we stopped. NASA's focus shift and global context. When people ask why we haven't gone back to the moon, NASA's answer is straight. We're not stuck, we've evolved. Modern technology lets us observe the lunar surface in mind-blowing detail without ever leaving Earth. Telescopes like James Webb and orbiters from multiple nations are feeding back high-res images and data 24/7. So why spend billions to send people back to a place we've already been? At least, that's one side of the argument. Apollo missions brought back hundreds of pounds of moon rock. Those samples told us more about the moon's origin and structure than centuries of stargazing ever could. Some were so rare and sought after, they ended up selling for over $50,000 per gram on the black market. That's how valuable the mission's returns were. And let's not forget, this wasn't some backroom deal. The first moon landing was televised. The world tuned in together. And while the broadcast was in black and white, in a special format that most networks couldn't even handle, NASA had to enhance and convert the footage just to make it viewable for the public. And even then, it wasn't perfect. But radio signals? Those were real time. Giant radio telescopes, Goldstone in California, Parkes in Australia, Honeysuckle Creek, all locked in and recorded the data, not just in the US, but globally. That's what makes the hoax theory hard to swallow. Other countries were watching too. Countries that weren't exactly America's biggest fans, like the Soviet Union. Which brings us to one of Elon Musk's sharpest points. If the moon landing were fake, wouldn't Russia, America's greatest rival at the time, have been the first to call it out?
What appears to be a ladder. No word yet on when someone will be climbing down that ladder, but wait, here we go. I see something. There he is. We have him.
Rivalries, verifications, and whistleblowers. Elon Musk didn't just defend the moon landing with American evidence. He pointed at Russia. The Cold War wasn't only a political standoff, it was a full-blown space race to see who could dominate the stars first. And when the United States planted its flag on the moon in 1969, Russia didn't deny it. They congratulated. Let that sink in. If there was ever a moment to expose a hoax, this was it. The Soviets had their own tracking systems. They were listening, watching, calculating every move. If the United States had faked it, the USSR would have had the receipts and every reason to go public, but they didn't. In fact, they kept going. Over the decades, Russia, Japan, China, each sent their own missions to the moon. And none of them, not a single one, returned with evidence that the Apollo landings were a lie. And yet the conspiracy theories refused to die. Whistleblowers from within NASA have leaked photos and documents over the years. Some strange, others easily explained. But it's these leaks that keep the fire burning. At this point, it isn't just about science or light. It is about trust. And that trust took another hit when video discrepancies entered the conversation. Continued rivalries and the flag debate. By the time conspiracy theorists began analyzing the videos, they pointed to the astronauts' movements as one of the biggest red flags. In some clips, they walk slowly, like divers underwater. In others, they bounce, light and exaggerated, as if they're on a trampoline. Same moon, same gravity, but different physics? Then came the shocker. In 2006, NASA publicly admitted they couldn't locate the original broadcast tapes of the Apollo 11 moon landing. The tapes weren't destroyed, they said, just misplaced. That was all skeptics needed. A missing original question mark. To them, it confirmed everything. And to make it worse, a few training photos, staged for simulations, were once released as if they were the real thing. Not on purpose, NASA claimed, but by then, the damage was done. Conspiracy theorists ran with it. There were whispers about an artificial moon theory, wild ideas that the moon itself isn't what we think it is, that it was placed there by some aliens or something to monitor Earth. Of course, none of that held up against the hard data collected over decades. Samples confirmed the moon's age and composition. Seismometers left by astronauts detected moonquakes. It wasn't hollow, it wasn't artificial, but all these strange debates trace back to one book. A book written in the mid-70s by a man named Bill Kaysing.
What actually happened in my mind is that during the 60s, they said, if you can't make it, fake it.
Bill Kaysing and public distrust. Bill Kaysing never built a rocket, never studied physics, never walked through a NASA facility as an engineer. Before publishing one of the most controversial books of the 20th century, his writing was focused on cooking and gardening. But in 1976, he dropped a bomb. We never went to the moon, and that was all it took. Kaysing's claims weren't backed by evidence so much as suspicion. He believed the moon landing was too perfect, too polished, too unbelievable to be true. He didn't trust the government, and at the time, neither did many Americans. This was the post-Watergate era, a time when faith in authority was already cracking. So when Kaysing spoke, people didn't just listen, they leaned in. He appeared on national television, held his ground against scientists, and turned public doubt into fuel. Suddenly, it wasn't just a fringe belief, it was dinner table conversation. Even now, many of the theories floating online can be traced back to Kaysing's book. Shadow discrepancies, missing footage, claims of Hollywood sets. He planted the seeds, and the internet made them grow. But despite the storm, the evidence never vanished. The data, the samples, the third-party tracking, they all still point to one reality. The United States landed on the moon.
Across 6 crewed missions, astronauts brought home 842 pounds of moon rocks.
Now, most of those samples have been used for research, but others were given to the people of the world. One of those rocks, given to South Carolina, was reportedly missing.
The moon rocks that went missing, and the black market that wants them. For all the debates about whether we really went to the moon, there's one piece of evidence that should have shut every conspiracy theory down: the moon rocks. Real physical samples brought back by the Apollo missions, rocks that are chemically unlike anything found on Earth, except some of them are gone. Between Apollo 11 and Apollo 17, NASA brought back a staggering 842 pounds of lunar material. Most were stored in secure vaults at the Johnson Space Center, but not all of them stayed there. In the years after the missions, NASA gifted tiny samples, encased in acrylic or mounted on plaques, to every U.S. state and more than 130 countries around the world as diplomatic gestures. These goodwill moon rocks were meant to inspire, to serve as tangible proof of humanity's achievement. And yet, decades later, a shocking number of them are missing, gone, unaccounted for. Some were stolen, others were misplaced in government storage. A few are believed to have been sold on the black market for astronomical sums, up to $5 million for a piece barely larger than a fingernail. There's even a name for the investigators who track them: moon rock hunters.
Special agents will talk about the search for missing moon rocks.
One of the most famous cases involves Honduras. In the 1990s, a U.S. businessman was caught trying to sell the Honduran goodwill rock for millions to undercover FBI agents.
This moon rock was offered to me for $5 million.
$5 million?
$5 million.
The sting operation, known as Operation Lunar Eclipse, revealed a whole underground network of collectors willing to pay anything to own a piece of the moon. In other cases, the theft wasn't so cloak and dagger. In 1973, a moon rock presented to the Netherlands turned out to be petrified wood. A mix-up? A swap? No one knows for sure. The allure is obvious. These aren't just rocks, they're artifacts from another world, touched by only a handful of humans. And here's the twist.
3, 2, 1.
Elon Musk's return to the moon plans could set off another wave of lunar treasure fever. More samples, more international gifts, and more opportunities for them to disappear into private vaults. So while the future may bring new lunar discoveries, it could also revive an old problem. To prevent that, perhaps Musk has decided to do things differently. He's building rockets. His focus is forward, beyond the moon, toward Mars. But first, he's planning something big, something the world hasn't seen since 1972, a return. And this time, it won't be grainy footage. Musk's future missions.
We have liftoff.
Elon Musk doesn't see the moon as a mystery, he sees it as step one. In a recent podcast, he laid it out clearly. Before SpaceX takes humanity to Mars, it's heading back to where it all began: the moon. Not for nostalgia, but for progress. Real infrastructure, real goals. And the rocket to do it? Starship. Well, Starship is a super heavy lift vehicle, capable of carrying over 100 tons of cargo. It's bigger than anything from the Apollo era. Way bigger. Musk says it could be used to build a moon base, not just land and leave, but land and stay. According to him, Apollo 11 was an outlier, something that happened sooner than it should have. Technology was rushed, budgets were endless, and the political pressure, intense. To Musk, it was like someone reaching into the future, grabbing a tool we weren't supposed to have yet, and using it anyway. That's why it seemed so surreal, because it was. But now, the technology is catching up. This time, it won't be about footprints and flags. It'll be about colonies, research stations, and long-term presence. SpaceX already has a contract with NASA. The Artemis program aims to land astronauts on the lunar surface again. But with Musk involved, the vision goes way beyond Apollo.
Next step after the Apollo program would be to have a base on the moon.
He talks about cities on the moon, communities on Mars, a multi-planetary species. And whether you believe in conspiracies or not, this much is clear. The future is coming fast. The doubts, the debates, the photos, the whispers, they may never fully disappear. But if Musk delivers, the next moon landing won't need to prove anything. It'll speak for itself. And this time, when those boots hit the surface, the whole world will be watching in high definition. So the real question isn't, did we go? It's, are you ready to go again? And if Musk is right, what else have we misunderstood all this time? Hit that subscribe button for more stories that challenge what you thought you knew. And drop your thoughts below. Could the greatest achievement in history still be hiding its biggest secret?